Hello, Great Giza Pyramid. If you take the time to go to surface.greatgizapyramid.com or surface.giza.ws, you will come across this really cool chart, which was done up by a gentleman in the 1800s, which shows the elevations and deviations of each of the layers of the Great Giza Pyramid. Now, what does all that confusing miss saying mean? Well, what it says is that every one of the steps, draw a couple of different variables here, they calculated the elevation and the average, because it kind of, in some areas, one rock will come out further, another rock will come out this way, and if you were to look at it, it kind of, they're not all the same, but did the average of the depth of change and the elevation of change and came up with that really cool chart. Now, when you take the time to look at that really cool chart, you'll notice that the surface of the structure is not a constant set of steps. Now, the third structure on that plateau is. The third structure is, because that is the control, that is the ground, that is the neutral. But this one, the Great Giza Pyramid, the one we're talking about, has an area where the 35th level has the largest depth and elevation, and then from there, all of the steps from there up are less than that one. That is the barrier that quarantines the static electricity to the upper surface of the structure. Now, there's a couple of spots where they're also larger. One of them is the elevation at which the conduit comes down into the system. And another one correlates with the change on the second structure, where if you look at it, it has a pattern of change which is visually obvious. They have actually like 4 changes on this structure, where you've got larger steps at the bottom, and then they get lesser as they get to the top. In fact, way up at the top, it is practically dead smooth. And then, of course, there's a little ground that comes off that one side. But the purpose of this is to quarantine the static electricity to the top of the structure and to create certain areas. Oh, what I also didn't point out is it has a pattern where, like, they're smaller up here, and then they get larger, and then they get smaller and larger and smaller and larger and smaller and larger and smaller and larger, so that there's a sweeping pattern which will take any static electricity that's on the surface and kind of coax it to go higher, where it creates a little bubble, and then as soon as this bubble it gets to its capacity, it shorts to the one above it, and then once it gets to that capacity, it shorts to the one above it, constantly pushing that static electricity up to the upper layers of the structure. And I believe it is intended to get that static electricity actually quarantined, or at least at its highest capacity, at the point where the conduit, now I drew the conduit from the south side here, assuming this is the south and this is the north, as I normally do, but this is actually the south side is the air conduit. It is the conduit from that side, which is the one that they actually pull the static electricity into the structure through. This is the one that shorts with the Grand Gallery and then comes over to the Queen's Chamber. The Queen's Chamber is at the same elevation as that 35th level there. That is because the static electricity is within the structure is brought down below that level and ultimately quarantined within the Queen's Chamber, or the arc room as I like to call it, where it is coaxed out the wall, the southern wall, which is where they saw the electrical arcing, which they cut through to find the conduit behind it. Now, of course, in the 1800s, when we first discovered that electrical arcing, the average person didn't even know what electricity was. Faraday was still rubbing his rods. Tesla hadn't played with electricity yet. Tesla wasn't at the beginning of the 1900s, late 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. We're going to have electrical wars between Edison and Tesla. Yay. That is when the average person started to understand and use electricity and know that you can take batteries and do little electrical arcing. And in fact, I don't even know. I have to look up when arc welding was first discovered, but it obviously was after we discovered electricity. Didn't have arc welding before that, but these guys kind of were doing arc welding. Only they weren't doing arc welding. They were doing arcing of electricity through a brick wall to a conduit behind it, and hence tapping that static electricity off of the surface of the structure through the conduit. So, but really, what I really want you to do is go to that, look at the surface of the structure, see how it has a sweeping pattern. Now that I've mentioned it, you can see it right there. It's very visually obvious. There's a sweeping pattern. You can see it's tighter at the top. You can see the areas of large steps. This right here is the area where the conduit to the upper chambers go. And way down here, this is the 35th level. This is the, I'm backwards here. I'm looking at everything in a mirror. Let me look at it the right way. Right here. That is your 35th level, and that is your largest barrier. That is your resistance factor that quarantines the static electricity. Doesn't quite quarantine it, because like any Van de Graaff generator that you're playing with a little band there, it can only hold so much, and after it gets to the point of capacity, it'll start venting off into the ambient air anyway. This would do the same thing. It would either breach the gap of the 35th level or vent off the surface of the top of the structure regardless. It'll just get to its capacity and then maintain its capacity. And I believe if we model the structure, you'll find that its highest capacity is about half to 3/5 of the way up the structure. And I look at that based on the patterns of the surface. I believe that is where you're going to have your highest yield of the static electricity. Again, I could be wrong. I'm no expert here. Static electricity is not my thing yet. But when we model it and make it as close to the construction of the Great Giza Pyramid, or this is something we can do without a whole lot of modification. We just take that nice antenna off the top of the structure. So we go up there and talk to the Giza Antiquities. You just unbolt the bottom of that. Just take the antenna off the top of that. Just do it for like a week, okay? And then we get a couple of people up there with GS meters, I believe what they're called. I forget what the G stands for. The S is Stenson, like Jerome and Stenson or whatever, GS meters. It meters the ambient amount of static electricity. Or we could get those jars where you have like 2 little pieces of aluminum foil, and we just walk up and down the structure, and I think you'll find that when you get to here, those little puppies are going to be doing that. Down here, they're going to be closer together. Up here, they'll again be closer together. But your highest level, where those little 2 foil things are going to be at the most potential amount of energy, is going to be about there on the structure, because that is where it pulls it into the structure. Now, again, I'd like to be shown wrong, like somebody actually, because I'm looking for the truth. I'm not looking to make something up and give you a story about how the structure does what I want it to do. I want to look at the structure and actually figure out what the structure does. The structure is built this way, it is engineered this way, it is engineered this way intentionally, and it does work. It does work without moving. Like, it's an awesomely engineered machine. It's an awesomely engineered machine. The only moving parts are the elements within, which are mostly water, hydrogen, oxygen, and I think we're also going to get some nitrogen play. And there might be some ammonia involved, or something like ammonia, some compound maybe that we haven't actually named yet. But either way, help me, I'll help you. Let's get to the truth.